Good morning, everyone. Hello, my name is Sarah DioGuardi, and I'm a proud member of the Brown class of 1983, and also a managing director at KPMG. I am, along with my fellow steering committee member, Dana Zucker, class of 1990, I'm delighted to kick off the second day of the 125 Years of Women at Brown Conference. I also want to mention that I'm a proud parent of my daughter, Lindsay Ruda, who's a freshman here, class of 2020. Not even slightly marred by the weather, yesterday was a terrific experience with so many remarkable Brown alumni and parents coming together to demonstrate the power of this community. I'm looking forward to another exciting slate of panels and discussions today. We begin this morning with a conversation between two-time Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright Lynn Nottage and Associate Professor of Theater Arts and Performance Studies, Kim Moore.
I get the honor of telling you about these amazing speakers. Professor Moore is a director, playwright, producer, and screenwriter. She came to Brown in 2008 as a visiting professor and became an assistant professor in 2011. Her teaching is focused on innovative performance, including digital and virtual reality elements, and the exploration of race, class, gender, and sexuality in performance. She holds a BA from the State University of New York and an MFA from the University of Massachusetts. She's also a teaching artist at the Trinity Repertory Company in Providence. Ms. Nottage, Brown class of 1986, recently received her second Pulitzer Prize for her play Sweat, which I'm coming to see in 2 weeks, and I'm so excited. Everyone should get tickets quickly, they're going fast. But this award made her the first female playwright to win the Pulitzer twice. Her first win was for her acclaimed play Ruined in 2009, also exceptional. She's the recipient of a MacArthur Genius Grant Fellowship, among several other prestigious awards and fellowships over the course of her career. She's very busy, the co-founder of the production company Market Road Films, and has developed original projects for HBO, Sidney Kimmel Entertainment, Showtime, and Oprah's production company, Harpo. She's a faculty member at the Yale School of Drama. No, she's not a faculty member at the Yale School of Drama. Oh, I'm getting to that, okay. She's not a faculty member at the Yale School of Drama, but she does teach graduate playwriting at the Columbia School of the Arts. Sorry. In addition, she's been incredibly generous with her time for Brown, serving on several alumni panels and the current advisory council on the arts. We are so delighted to have you with us today. Please join me in welcoming her and Professor Moore to the stage.
I also wanted to add that I'm the proud parent of a freshman here at Brown in 2020.
Wow. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi. It's amazing to have you, as always, in our presence. It's 125 years of women at Brown. You are one of two female playwrights on Broadway, both of whom are connected to Brown. And I thought we could start there since they're both kind of milestones. Can you talk a little bit about
Sure.
what that means for you?
One of the things that I think is most amazing for me, at least in this moment, is that I'm sharing this space, which is Broadway, with Paula Vogel, who was my playwriting professor here at Brown, and who is someone who is really instrumental in me taking this journey, because I remember, and I had a very good experience here at Brown. I got to study with an incredible professor named George Bass, who just nurtured and supported me and really taught me about the joy of making theater. But it really wasn't until I met Paula that I understood that I could make this full journey, because she was working out in the world as a playwright, and she was the very first female faculty member that I encountered who was doing theater. And so up until then, I really thought, this is just a hobby. It's not a place that's going to be welcoming for women. And she said, you know, you can do it. And we need the numbers. The more of us that are doing it, the easier it will get. And she gave me the application to the Yale School of Drama and said, fill it out and go. And so it's really kind of fortuitous in this monumental moment that we are meeting again on Broadway.
Wow.
Because she's the reason that I'm there. And and just talking about Broadway and the glass ceiling, that Broadway remains one of the few places that's really difficult for us as female artists to penetrate. Paula and I are the only two women right now that have plays represented on the main stage, which seems kind of astonishing in 2017. And in part, we have these plays because of female lead producers. And one being Darryl Roth, and two, Darryl Roth and Liz McCain, who produced Paula's play, and then I had Louise Gund and Stuart Thompson. But without those women producing, we could not have gotten there, because there are very few male producers who are really willing to take a chance on us.
Wow. Did it come as a total surprise to you, or how did that process happen?
Well, the journey to Broadway is so circuitous and strange, and you just, and still, even though I'm there, remains a great mystery to me. But very early on, my play, Sweat, was commissioned by the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, which is producing all of these wonderful plays by playwrights around the American Revolution. And I completed the script, and I was getting ready to go to Oregon to produce the play, and my agent happened to send it to a producer who read it before we even went into production and said, I really love this play. And then Louise Gund, who's also one of our lead producers, heard me talk about the play and said, I'm interested in this play, before she even read the script.
Wow. So, I mean, it's amazing that you're there. We're so thrilled that you're there. There are a lot of young women around, I'm teaching them. What kind of advice do you have for them, given, their circuitous road to Broadway?
Well, I teach young playwrights as well, and the majority of my classes in the last 3 years has been women, so hopefully we'll see that tilts the balance in terms of what's on the stage, because the statistics are kind of staggering right now still in theater. I think that only 15% of the plays that are produced throughout the country are written by women, and I think that the statistics even less for plays that are directed by women. And so I keep telling my students that it's a battle of attrition, that you can't give up and you can't be disappointed and you can't look at those numbers and run away, is that you just have to continue to lean into it. Yeah. And I think they're hearing it more and more. And I also think that what's changing the game a lot is television, that there's opportunity for women, there's health benefits for women. Women can make choices like having babies, because what happened years ago when I first started is, as a young playwright, you got pregnant and then you had to give up a career. And I think that that's less true now because of other opportunities.
That's fantastic. Do you think that your experience at Brown did anything to help mold, shape you, prepare you for that journey?
Yeah, I think absolutely. In part, I came to Brown because it had this open curriculum, and I came as a pre-med student for some unknown reason. Because I honestly, and this is honest to God truth, I really was never interested in being a doctor. And somewhere along my journey, someone thought, she'd make a good doctor, and I thought I would not. And the medical profession is really much better because I'm not a doctor.
Oh, but you are.
But I am a different kind.
Yes,
But I came in my first year, sort of being very, very sort of macho. I decided to take 5 science and math courses. I did it for actually 2 years each semester. And the one refuge that I had is in my second year, freshman year, I took a playwriting course. And that became my absolute favorite place to go. And it was the place that I sort of sought comfort after sort of poring over textbooks and having my brain almost explode. I can then sit down and go into my own imagination and invent. And I love that kind of invention. And I thought, this feels very natural to me. And from there, I sought out Rights and Reasons Theater, which is right over here, and began working on production sort of backstage. And I thought, I actually don't want to continue to work backstage. I want to create work for this stage. And I began just writing plays on my free time. I did a couple plays at Leeds Theater. I did something at Rights and Reasons, and I really felt that Brown allowed me the space to explore. I think some other universities might have tracked me and forced me to sort of keep on that pre-med track. But but my advisors are like, you don't want to do pre-med? Stop. My scholarship went away, but but my parents, being the magical people that they were, made it happen.
Yeah.
So
Amazing.
yeah, and I just, yeah.
Wow. From Brown to 2 Pulitzer Prizes. Talk about that. I mean, that's amazing. How do you... Does that, I mean, it seems like the Broadway thing is one thing, but then to receive that kind of recognition.
Well, but you know, I think about Ruined, which is a play, and for those of you who are not familiar with the play is about women in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And in part, I wrote the play because this war was raging in the center of Africa, and it was the largest war since World War II, just in terms of the numbers that were being devastated. I think by the time the war ended, 5.4 million people had died. And the fact that so few people knew that, and I figured of those 5.4 million people, half of them were women. And those stories weren't being told. And I thought, I'm just going to go to Africa. And I went to East Africa, and I spent 2 years trying to find the stories of the women. I really think that the Pulitzer was rewarded because I entered into this space that was dark and illuminated. And I think that it was such a revelation to so many people that this was happening. And I think that Sweat is really similar. Yeah, the journey of Sweat, which is about a group of very close-knit friends that work in a metal tubing factory, a steel factory in Reading, Pennsylvania in 2000. And they discover that they're going to be locked out of their factory. And the play really revolves around what happens to their friendships and how it's fractured along racial lines when they experience economic insecurity. And one of the reasons I was told that I won the Pulitzer Prize is that I did the journalism that the journalists weren't doing. Yeah. But this is true. This is by the committee. That's someone said. And so I went to Reading, Pennsylvania, which at the time I began my investigation was 2011, was the poorest city in all of America. And I spent years just interviewing as many people as possible, trying to really figure out what was happening to our American narrative, you know, the way in which it was being corrupted by economic stagnation. And what I found was people who felt invisible, people who felt marginalized, people who felt like their story was an important story, but really was not reaching the mainstream. So I think that what ties the two tales together, Sweat and Ruin, is the fact that they're about people who have been rendered invisible by circumstance.
Yeah, yeah. You know, we just had Richard Feldman here from Juilliard, and he was talking about how all theater is really political, that if you put a person on the stage and they start to speak, it's political. And I just read that article in the Times where they was interviewing you and Paula about politics and theater. Can you talk a little bit about that in terms of You know, because there is that distinction that's like there's political theater and then there's this other thing. And
Yeah, I'm someone who's not afraid to lean into the notion of being a political writer. I think for so many years we've been told that it's a bad thing, and I don't. I think it's really important, particularly as women theater artists, for us to have strong opinions and to put those strong opinions on the stage. And I think particularly now in this moment where we are, which is a moment which I consider to be a crisis moment for women and people of color, I think it's really, really essential that our stories be center stage, and that who we are is asserted in a way that's really, really robust. And I think, you know, sort of circling back to Paula and myself, I think that one of the things that ties our two plays together is that they're about tough subject matters. Hers is about censorship, and mine is about economic insecurity and poverty. Yeah. And I think 5 years ago, you might not have seen these plays on Broadway, but I feel like now is the moment in which we really, as artists, I mean, this is something that I believe is that artists have to be at the vanguard of change. And in particular, playwrights traditionally have occupied that space, you know, and if we sort of lean back in this moment and create confections, you know, I was talking to someone about the difference between what I do and what musicals like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory do, is, you know, there's a moment in which you want to eat that cream puff or that chocolate cake, but it becomes too rich, and it's not always that good for you, but sometimes you want that savory meal that has complexity, that, you know, it's that comfort food where you go and you just bite into the chicken and you eat the rice. And I think that that's what we're offering in this moment is a savory meal that's more complicated.
Yeah, thank you. Can you talk a little bit about your writing process? I mean, we want your secrets. How do you do it?
You know, my process is so scattered. I spend a lot of time researching, and I don't see researching as procrastination. That is my process.
Thank you.
And
thank you. I will say it again. Because there's sometimes resistance to research, and I think that's insane. I don't
that's
get it.
That's where I live.
Yeah.
Like Sweat, it took me 3 years to research this play, and people were like, "Oh, you're not working." It's like, I am working. I'm working really, really hard. But what happens is, because I spend so much time invested in investigating the piece, that when I finally sit down to write, the writing happens very quickly. In the case of Sweat, my organizing principle for the play was a workshop that I was in, and every 2 weeks I had to bring in pages, and I decided that every 2 weeks that I was going to bring in a different scene and just move forward and never look backward. And by the end of that workshop, I had gotten almost to the last scene of the play, and so it was written.
Wow.
And also just in terms of process, I'm someone who needs to know where I'm going. I know some people like to work in spirals, but I always write the first scene and the last scene at the same moment, and then I work toward that.
Amazing. Great. I know you work with Kate Worski a lot. She's your director.
Yeah.
I mean, you're really privileged to have that relationship. Can you talk about the director-writer relationship? How does she influence or not? You know,
I've done 4 shows with my collaborator Kate Worski, from Intimate Apparel, Fabulation, Ruined, and then Sweat. And I think that the key to our success is that we forged a very good friendship and that we trust each other implicitly. And I feel like when she sees something wrong, it's what I also see what's wrong. And we just, I feel like we have a similar sensibility in terms of storytelling. And also she will follow me on adventure. And I think I'm one of these people that just likes to explore. You know, I'm very impatient. It's like I want to keep moving. And so when I called up Kate and said, I want to go to Africa, to East Africa, to explore the story, she said, okay, I'll go with you. And she's someone who really was the worst traveler. She was, I kid you not, and this is a true story, I'll tell you really quickly. We decided in the midst of doing our research that we were going to have some adventures, and we decided that we're going to go gorilla trekking. And we went gorilla trekking, and we sort of were marching through the forest for 5 hours, and finally our guide said, there they are, shh. And just at that moment, she panicked, and she got bug spray, and she sprayed it all over herself, spraying in her mouth, and then passed out.
Oh my God.
And we're like, oh my God. And so that was the way in which she traveled. So we have many adventures. And then the other adventure, we decided to go whitewater rafting, which was the biggest misadventure of my life because no one told us that you're going to go into the water. So we were fully, I mean, we were not prepped. But midway down the river, Kate saw the first rapid and she said, pull over, let me out. And the guy's like, and he's like, you know, you're 10 miles from anywhere and you're barefoot. She's like, it doesn't matter. And he pulled over the boat and she got out and she walked 10 miles barefoot. Rather than face. But that's in part why I love her, is that she'll begin the adventure with me.
Amazing.
So,
what do you have coming up? Are you working on something right
I mean,
now?
I have it's a busy time. I think that in many ways that this is the apotheosis of a lot of really hard work. And that question about what do you tell your students is that I have been on this playwriting journey for 25 years. It's taken me and Paula Vogel, who's a master teacher and a master of playwrights, also taking her 40 years to get to the point where she is. And it only, for a lot of young men, it takes them 5 or 10 years. Mm-hmm. But that the journey is long and it's hard and you have to slog it out. But the great thing is that I'm at the moment where I have a lot that I really love that's going on. Yeah. I'm turning intimate apparel into an opera that was commissioned by the Met, and we're almost finished, and it's really beautiful. I hope that I'm not jinxing myself by saying that, but I listen to it and I'm just like, oh my God, this is so beautiful. Me and the composer hold hands and we cry. And then I'm working on an adaptation of Secret Life of Bees with a really amazing team with Duncan Sheik, who's the composer. He did Spring Awakening, and Susan Birkenhead, who's the lyricist, and she did Jelly's Last Jam. And then we're working with director Sam Gold, who's sort of like the it director of the moment. And then I'm also working on an adaptation of Black Orpheus. I don't know whether folks saw this beautiful, luscious 1959 film about the Orpheus and Eurydice myth that takes place in Carnival in Rio, and so I'm doing that with director George Wolfe, and it's going to be a new musical. Wow. And then the thing, though, I'm most excited about, because it really is about stretching muscles, and every year I do something that really terrifies me, so much so that I'm paralyzed when I do it, but I sort of push through and do it. And so this year I decided that I've really been interested in sort of looking at how you create theater beyond the proscenium, because I feel like institutions are really stifling our stories and forcing us to sort of meet them rather than them coming to us. And so I'm building this massive performance installation in Reading, Pennsylvania, where to basically to say thank you to the people in that city for being so open to me, and also in part because you talk about this moment of chaos. When I went into Reading, one of the problems that I saw is that it's a city that's so fractured along economic and racial lines, and a city that's so unwilling to be in dialogue. And as artists, I thought, what can we do to put all of these folks who are on the other side of the divide into one space? And we sort of talk about, it's like we want the mayor and the homeless guy to stand and to gaze and realize that we all share one narrative. And so we've occupying this abandoned space, which is the Reading Railroad, which you know from Monopoly.
From Monopoly.
And it's a space that's been abandoned since 1981. It's really significant to that city because when it closed, it really was the central artery, and with it, the city withered. And we're going to reanimate it in this very beautiful way. Wow. And with the stories of the people of Reading.
I think it's one of the things I appreciate so much about your work. We did Vera Stark last semester, And I work with media, so it was like, oh my God, it has media. You're very brave and muscular and imaginative in the work, and it was a thrill to work on that. We had so much fun doing the screwball comedy thing. I don't know if you know this play, but it talks about the life of a fictional African-American actress named Vera Stark, who's kind of a model for Lena Horne and these early black actresses in Hollywood. And I don't know if you're familiar with the screwball comedy style, but that writing is really hard. The timing was insane. And it was so much fun. We laughed through the whole rehearsal process. It was fantastic.
You know, the thing I really enjoyed when I was doing Vera Stark is that we created all of these artifacts to drop on the internet so that people who didn't know the play would find them. And so we created faux documentaries on a couple of different websites that became so popular that one of them, which is a character in a play, Herb Forrester,
yes,
got invited to speak at the New York Academy of Arts. And I had to let them know that he was a work of fiction.
I mean, it's great though, because I think people think about working in one style,
Yeah.
and maybe this is too broad a question, but because, you know, if you say playwright, it seems like it's in a box, and I think, what you're talking about is being an artist. Can you talk a bit about
Sure.
that?
I mean, at Columbia, and I'm sure this is probably true at Brown, is that the notion of playwriting is really evolving. That it's not just about creating work for the stage, but creating work across all of the multiple platforms that we're using now to tell stories. And so we're trying to figure out, how do we tell stories on Twitter? How do we tell stories on the internet? And so many playwrights now are working with television, but really trying to draw that bridge between what happens here on the stage, which I think is really special, which will never change, and what's happening in this culture that's becoming so fast and furious, and the way in which we receive information is so much quicker that we as artists have to become much more agile in the way in which we deliver our messages and our stories.
Yeah. So in that, did something in particular train you? Like, how did you develop your aesthetic?
Just by doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, by just by, yeah.
But were there like any major influences, any writers that influence how you?
For sort of in terms of multimedia?
In terms of the work that you're doing? There's so much. Are there like three people that sort of?
There's a multimedia artist named Lynn Woolworth, who I think does beautiful storytelling work across platforms. And when I saw her work, it really opened up this new window for me, and just the ways in which you can build empathy in very quick ways.
Yeah, beautiful. I think we are. I'm not wrapping this up very cleanly, but it's been amazing.
Well, this is great.
I could sit here all morning. I'm so fascinated. Thank you so much, Lynn Nottage, for being with us. And thank you.